Hello, we are live.
We are live finally. Happy Thursday, everyone.
Yeah, thanks for having us.
Yeah, so welcome everyone to episode 18 of In Fintech We Build Trust, titled The Robots Are Coming, the Artificial Intelligence Advantage, excuse me. My name is Gretchen Keller, and I'm here with my wonderful co-host, Dana Lawrence. And today we are joined by Stephanie Mertz and Clarence Chio. So welcome. Thank you so much for joining us. While some of our audience members and people are getting logged in, as always, let's take a moment to share some of our recent wins or fun facts. And as always, anyone in the audience, feel free to share your recent wins or fun facts as well. We are here to celebrate you today. So Dana, I am still thinking, so I'm kicking it off to you. Recent win or fun fact?
Sure. So I actually have two really quick ones. The first one is personal, and that is my sister just got a brand new golden retriever puppy. It was like 8 weeks old. So I just spent a week with her, helping like take care of the puppy. I had like the night shift, so I'd like take it out in the middle of the night, and we are getting that thing housebroken. It is the sweetest, sweetest little dog, and just like the little puppy teeth and just the overall cuteness. So that was a big fun win. And then professionally, if any of you are going to Finovate in San Francisco this May, I'll be there speaking on a panel about banking as a service. So really excited about that. Clarence, let's pass it over to you. Can you share a recent win or fun fact about yourself?
Yeah, it's a little bit of both, but I am a self-admitted domain name hoarder. Uh, I just enjoy spending my time looking for fun domain names, and I've
Oh,
made a bunch of sales from them, but mostly it's been a loss maker. Uh, the recent win though is that we at Coverbase recently was trying to look for a good name for a test product that we were launching, and I happened to have bought this domain name thumbsup.ai before. And I was like, wait, this could be great. So I managed to dig in my trough of about 2,000 domain names I bought and found the perfect one that never happened. It's the first time this has ever happened before.
I am I am so curious about this. Can you like tease us with like any other of your like favorite domain names, or is it kind of just top
Mm.
secret?
It's not top secret. The one that I'm the most proud of is I found this mismatch between the Instagram handle and existing domain name for my favorite soup dumpling restaurant in New York City, and I bought it and I just gave it to them, and
Oh,
so now they have both. And yeah, it's
that is so awesome. I love this. Well, thanks so much, Stephanie. Now it's your turn. What is a fun fact or recent win that you would like to share with us?
I'm going in the direction of fun fact. When I was young, got a black belt in Taekwondo.
Oh my gosh, Gretchen,
That's
I think this like exceeds every fun fact we've ever heard.
How young is young? Like, are we talking 7? Are we talking 17?
Like middle school, late elementary school. So it's
wow.
definitely a little bit of participation award in there, I'm sure.
Yeah. So does that mean like you are still that rating for your lifetime once you've achieved it, or do you have to like recertify for that?
It's actually a good question. I don't know. I did have to sign a document saying that if I did accidentally harm someone with my feet or my hands, I could be tried in court as having used a weapon.
My gosh.
Wow.
Wow.
I think that still applies.
Oh
Legally
my,
certified to have your hands and feet listed as weapons.
yeah, that's pretty awesome. Um, all right, Gretchen, no pressure. What is your fun fact or recent win?
Yes. So my kind of fun fact and recent win, it's a bit of both. A lot of people don't know this, but I actually am extremely into bodybuilding. So I did my first competition in 2021, and I have been weightlifting quite heavily, both physically and metaphorically. Um, since then, and growing muscle and eating more and whatnot. And I just signed up with my old bodybuilding coach again. So I'm excited to, get the whole thing going again. And it's just a really fun passion project of mine. So yeah, looking forward to kicking that off.
Nice.
Yeah, but speaking of kicking things off, welcome again, everyone, to In FinTech We Build Trust. We are so glad that you're here. As always, please do let us know in the comments where you're joining us from. For those of you who are new, In FinTech We Build Trust is a LinkedIn live show that is held once a month. And the purpose is really to support and celebrate the community of trust builders. So anyone who works in compliance, AML, risk management, internal audit, security, third-party risk, and any kind of related fields. Here, we discuss themes and education relevant to those within fintech, financial services, payments, crypto, and the Web3 space. Anyone who is supportive of these ideas and goals is welcome. And as always, we will be giving out books at the end of the show to individuals who participate in the chat. So feel free to throw in any questions, queries, and whatnot throughout the show. My name is Gretchen Keller, almost forgot that there. And I am on the executive search team for Hanlon Williams. So I place C-suite level executives, particularly within fintech and digital assets and the SaaS space, anything from seed through to IPO firms, more specifically within the compliance, legal risk, broader corporate governance space. And that's across the Americas, EMEA, and APAC. Kicking it over to Dana.
Awesome. Dana Lawrence here, and I lead banking as a service at an incredible bank in Portland, Oregon. And our goal is to create exceptional experiences for fintechs and strong regulatory outcomes. So I am thrilled as always to be here on the show and talk about all things compliance and fintech. I am so excited to have Stephanie Mertz on the show. I have connected with Stephanie a couple years ago and just so admire you. Such strong technical background. And I was wondering if you could just share in your own words a little bit more about yourself.
Yeah, thanks so much for having me. It's fun to be able to have a chat that's live and with audience participation too. This is new for me. My background's software engineering, and I love taking complex business processes and building systems around it. I've done this in the account offboarding space for financial institutions, and really excited about the direction that fintech and finance is heading.
Cool. We're so glad to have you. And Clarence, I think we connected maybe about within the last year. And I'm just super excited to have you on a guest as well. And you have some awesome experiences at Unit 21 and now at Coverbase. But could you tell the group a little bit more about your background, what you've been up to?
Yeah, absolutely. So I spent the last few years building this company called Unit 21, an AML automation platform. And I left last year to start a new company, Coverbase, that helps with the automation of third-party risk management, a lot in part influenced by the pains that we had to go through as a company selling to financial institutions and fintechs. And third-party risk, vendor risk is a broken function in a lot of ways, and we're trying to change the way that this is done using AI and generative techniques.
Wonderful.
Awesome. So let's get into it. I'm so excited for this episode because the extent to my knowledge of AI is simply using ChatGPT. I'm sure a lot of people can relate. So let's start out with our, most basic question, kind of, I guess our first question that we ask every guest who comes on the show is, what is your story and how did you get to where you currently are today? And then we'll jump into the different kinds of AI. So I'm gonna, Stephanie, let's hear it.
Sure thing. So I was a software engineer at an asset manager for a handful of years. I worked with the risk, compliance, and legal teams and built out a number of processes that we had internally. And really, really enjoyed that process, but really wanted to see what else was happening in the broader world. Co-founded a startup to deal with account offboarding. We automated the achievement process, and now just looking to explore a lot more in what's around in fintech.
That's
Um,
a
and so Steph, maybe can you talk to us a little bit about some of the terminology that gets thrown around under the umbrella of artificial intelligence? What do you think are maybe some important keywords or fundamentals people should know even before we dive into this?
Yeah, it's such a good one, right? I feel like a lot of our exposure to AI is often through the media. And so we have examples of movies like Her, a personal favorite of mine. If you haven't seen it, highly recommend. And then we see like these examples of companies that build AI to compete in games. But my experience coming into AI was much more from the math side. And I think it helps to start to understand what are inputs into a system and what are possible outputs. So you can have some really simple AI systems where you feed it a set of data and has a very specific defined task, which is understand the correlation of new data. Is it more like this data? Is it more like this data? Really simple models. But part of the reason that we're seeing so much more discussion around AI currently is we're starting to feed in a lot more data than we ever have historically into systems. So that's been really interesting because when I was in college and was building out an AI system, we actually used Mechanical Turk through Amazon to be able to create data sets to train a model. And that was a really limited, very expensive way of going about it. Now we have models that are ingesting tons more data, compute power is a lot cheaper. And so the range of information that we can compare inputs to is so much broader that we're seeing much more effective output. So with something like ChatGPT, you enter a prompt, it has so much more to look into to say, what would a reasonable response be and give you something back. So also, I'm curious to hear Clarence's input too, since he has quite literally written a book on this.
Oh yeah, Clarence has written a book on this. We should
Yeah,
probably put a little banner to the Amazon link to support
total
Clarence.
blend.
But yeah, thank you, Steph. And Clarence, maybe if you could share a little bit, like what do you see are kind of the fundamentals that you want to clarify for people before we dive in?
Yeah, fully agree with what Steph said. I think a lot of the way that people think about AI, especially in the last couple of years, has been colored by what's out there in the media, the advent of LLMs and ChatGPT and chatbots like that. But I think a way to really think about what has changed over the last couple of years that made this really different and impactful for a lot of people that are maybe getting a lot more familiar with this and making this part of their day-to-day is that AI and machine learning used to be thought of as you can build a very specific system to solve a very specific task. In the past, statistical learning systems and machine learning models, and they would kind of be idiot savants. You can make them do one thing really well, and you'd have to train it for a long time, and it would be a whole effort in itself. But I think what has changed, even the way that academics and machine learning researchers think about this over the last couple of years, is that you can actually successfully build something that, maybe we don't call it an AGI yet, but we can call it a very generalizable system. Today, I think what a lot of companies and startups are doing is that they're using what OpenAI has done with ChatGPT, what Microsoft has done with Copilot, and they are using it for a multitude of different use cases that maybe it wasn't trained specifically to do, and it still gets really great results. So I think the generalizability has really changed, and that's an important thing to keep in mind as we're thinking about how this space has evolved.
Awesome, I appreciate that. And just for the good of the group, can you define LLM?
Yes. LLM stands for large language models, and they are a specific type of software that uses statistical patterns learned from large-scale text data, a lot of the time obtained from the web and published materials, in order to identify concepts, grammatical patterns, and the way to answer questions that was obtained from looking at past examples of how these questions and how sentences are formed and how answers are created from that.
Okay, cool. And just one last question for both of you. What were your degrees in? Was it computer science for both of you?
Yes, computer
Yeah,
science,
computer
artificial
science and
intelligence.
systems engineering.
Cool. Awesome. Thank you. And if anyone has questions, like please take advantage of the brain power on this call because this is so cool. Or
So
Gretchen,
Might be
you want to
helpful.
dive into the next one?
yeah. So looking ahead, what do you both believe are what innovations or advancements in AI technology do you think will have the most significant impact on specifically compliance within the financial services industry in your experience? So let's kick it off to Clarence to start first. Would love to hear what you think.
Yeah, it's such a big topic right now. In every conference, every conversation I'm having with, people working in risk and compliance in financial institutions, they're talking about how AI will change the way that they work. And I think there are three areas to think about. I think this happens in conversations from the boardroom all the way to, casual conversations we have where everyone is talking about how AI will change their business, how their business will be made more or less relevant because of this change in the advent of this technology. The second is they're thinking about how this can increase the efficiency. And if they don't find a way to increase their efficiencies in this area, will they be left behind? And the third is, of course, the risk and the responsibility of the applications of AI in these areas. I think specifically in compliance, the third area is something that I don't think has had enough attention because there's so much excitement in different parts of the business about how you can use LLMs and ChatGPT and OpenAI to supercharge your functions. But I think compliance is specifically a very different beast where a lot of the time you don't just want to optimize for efficiency. You don't even just want to optimize for effectiveness. A lot of the time you really want to optimize for making sure that you are doing everything well. There's an audit trail of everything happening. And a lot of AI wasn't built with this in mind. So it's important to keep that in mind as we think about the applications of AI and compliance, especially in financial services.
I think that's a super interesting point. I'm taking some notes here with my pen and paper, but the fact that both of you have the lens of compliance is exciting to me as
Yeah,
you're out there in the world building products. So, Steph, what's kind of your response on that
I
one?
know. I was actually going to go in such a similar direction. It does make sense that I guess we're coming from a similar space, but I'm really excited for testability of AI models. How can you know that what you're building works? How can you know when you change something that it's going to continue to work? We've seen people be worried about hallucination in models and wrong answers. That's really, that can, depending on the use case, can actually be a pretty significant problem. How do we detect those and prevent those? How do we make sure we're restricting the use when that could possibly happen to maybe parts of a process where that is okay and the cost of false positives or false negatives is quite low? If it's just a tool to help you in your workflow and you're going to be kind of the quality control filter of anything that comes out of that, it's less impactful than if this is going to be information that's directly passed on to an end user.
Quick clarification question. Can you explain a little bit more around what a hallucination model is? I'm just generally curious.
Yeah, the way I've thought about it, and definitely always interested in your input too, Clarence. I think about it as when something is wrong. So that term of false positive or false negative. So when when I was in college building on model, Clarence alluded to back then we had very like specific task trained models. The model I was working on was computer vision taking images to determine if something was a pedestrian, a cyclist, or a car. Very, very specific. You're feeding in specific data points. So being wrong there would say, I think this is a person, when actually it's just a light post and it's something else or a mailbox. Now we're often referring to that wrongness as hallucination. Like ChatGPT gives you an answer that's completely made up. This happens sometimes if you're asking for code snippets and it'll say, do this. And that would be great if that function existed, but it doesn't. And it doesn't notice that that isn't actually possible or something that's accurate.
Wow. Okay. Yeah. Thank you for clarifying. Dana, did you want to kick off to the next one?
I can take the next one. So, kind of building on that, how do you see or what do you see some of the key challenges that a fintech or financial institution might face when implementing AI? And I know you mentioned a couple things, but kind of are there any other challenges you see and what might we do to adapt to that and use it sorry, I tried to combine a couple words there. Use it efficiently and effectively.
Maybe I'll take this one first. I
Yeah,
feel like
Clarence, go ahead.
there's so many different challenges, and the problem is that with with more well-established fields like security or legal or compliance, there's usually a person that is in charge of guaranteeing that everything is safe. Whereas because of how widespread the impact, the risks, the application of AI tends to be in banks and frankly in every company, there is not really any one person that is in charge of making sure that the applications of AI are safe. So that ends up being a challenge. Like a lot of the time when we go to banks and we talk to them about AI risk, it spans from legal to procurement to security to finance to engineering and infosec. And I think that's one of the big challenges here. And what I see a lot of banks doing actually quite successfully is just taking a stand, developing an AI policy that states what's okay with them, what's not okay with them, and just trying to get a grasp of the landscape, knowing that it will probably never be perfect. And it's something that will change and evolve over time because the landscape's evolving over time as well. But I think it's a start of a conversation and maybe helps to create this, a role or a function or a shared responsibility between different teams about how to deal with this emerging problem.
Cool. Steph, what's your take on this? What are some of the challenges in implementing it effectively at financial institutions?
I think everyone's trying to figure out where, as the first question, which processes are actually the right fit for this. And I think that's a really tough question. How sensitive is the data involved? Is this going to be something that's developed in-house where you actually trust the data security? Is it with a vendor where you really feel like this is a reliable place to be placing your data? Who's going to ensure that this process continues to operate? Like Clarence said, without an owner, with a lot of the systems internally, there's someone who's responsible for SLAs, someone who can step in if the system goes down. There's a whole continuity plan in place. And without that same level of care and thought, you don't want to replace a sensitive process with having nothing to fall back on. So I think we're going to keep hitting that question of what's actually the best spot for this. I think we've seen some easy answers, like maybe helping you write a blog post, right? Everyone can say that that's fine. There's little harm. Everything that you're putting into that is something you're going to put public anyway. And a much harder question of sensitive PII-based processes.
Mm-hmm. I appreciate all the comments so far. The regulator that enforces where I work is the FDIC, and I know they've made comments like we might not have guidance to govern everything that's happening in 2024, but you still need to incorporate everything that's been written to date and make sure what you're doing currently applies and complies with that. We had a comment in the audience from Catherine saying, shouldn't AI be subject to something like model risk governance? And that's something I grapple with. Like, we're not currently using AI for any decision-making models, but it's just something to think about. How could it not be subject to that? And model risk, it's like you need to know the inputs, you need to know the outputs, you need to have it, the explainability of it. So I don't know if you have any thoughts on that. That wasn't like a pre-planned question, but
Certainly, right? We have that for security with SOC 2 frameworks. We have that in so many different angles of defined industry best practices that I really think it's only a matter of time until we have similar defined best practices here. And I'm sure we'll incorporate some of the things we've seen elsewhere, like that explainability piece that you mentioned, Dana. To me, that's a number one thing.
and even like fair lending is something, and there's so many different things. So
Yeah. One thing that we learned recently, because we've had a bunch of conversations with model risk teams in banks,
Mhm.
and I think they are also trying to grapple with the breadth of the types of AI tools and AI models that they have to look at now being a lot wider than what they used to look at, which is typically lending, compliance, specific areas in compliance. And what I've seen these teams generally do is they split this into two arms. One is customer impacting models, and the other is efficiency models. And a lot of AI tools today are efficiency models that they may not think really falls under the compliance arm. So maybe if it's helping you generate marketing content, then it's categorized under efficiency. But I would like to caution anyone listening to this that I don't think it's that simple, because even if it's an efficiency tool, it probably also has some indirect implications on what customers are reading and what they're interacting with. And that's, if you put out a blog post that has some discriminatory material in there, then obviously there's going to be UDAP concerns that you have to think about. So I don't think it's very easy to draw a clean line, and this definitely has to evolve.
Fair lending and UDAP was actually the first place I think of when I think of compliance and AI. So that's a super interesting point that I didn't know that that's kind of how it's broken down into those two arms, from your experience or your perspective. Yuval in the chat had a really good question that I kind of want to touch upon. And she said, given that many AI tools are now commoditized and broadly available to the market, when evaluating between different AI-driven tools, how can one evaluate true competitiveness or technological advancements or advantages? Excuse me. Do either of you have kind of a take on that, or like how would you go about finding, the most competitive or fully advanced AI tool from like an average person's perspective?
I can give my take, and then Clarence is actually building one, so I'm sure he'll have one as well. But I think what I'm getting at with the heart of the question is, are all of these companies just ChatGPT wrappers? And why would I pay someone else to be a ChatGPT wrapper? And I think that's where the questions of architecture really come in. And it can be hard from an external view to understand how a product is actually built and implemented. But if a tool is built well, it can be so much more than just a wrapper. You can have very highly trained multiple models that all work together to provide a better output. You can have better data that you're providing it. You can have better data security. So I think if you're really just trying to understand, is this just a wrapper? Understanding how it's actually built, like what are the checks and balances? Are there other models that review the outputs of the first to give you better info at the end? Can help you to understand if this is a tool that's actually doing something that's better than if you were to just do it yourself.
Yeah, that's super well said. I kind of think of the whole range of AI products and services put out there on some level of the spectrum, ranging from infrastructure to application, just like many other software products. And when people think about AI tools, all of the time they think of, like Steph said, it's ChatGPT, it's a chatbot they interact with. But I think it's really important that the industry kind of evolves the way that we think about AI infrastructure to the builders of underlying services, like the foundational models that the large language models are based on. And then there's, I'm sure, going to be a whole bunch of interesting technology that people build on top of foundation models, just like people have built really interesting technologies over powerful database technology or powerful cloud infrastructure technology. I think AI will have to, and is already evolving in the same way.
Great analogy. I haven't heard the database one, but that's a great way to think about it.
I just wanted to chime in more from like the person working at the bank or the fintech, like how I evaluate things. I think also, since the technology is so new, just simply looking at from a business perspective, is this team easy to work with? Are they going to customize something for your needs? Is it going to, how are they going to be responsive with regards to third party risk requests? And, it's a lot of it's still evolving. So I think looking for someone who's a good partner as well.
Interesting perspectives. How, the ethicality and transparency with AI, I think, is the component to it that interests me the most personally. So, from both of your perspectives, how do you think financial institutions can ensure that AI algorithms are remaining transparent and compliant, with evolving regulations and the ever-changing regulatory landscape?
Steph can go first.
I feel really biased by some recent reporting I'd been reading of just reopening the case of where data comes from and is it coming from sources you have. And now when I hear ethics and AI, my brain is still stuck on that of whose data are you using to be able to leverage to build this model. I know that's not exactly what you were asking, Gretchen, but I do think it's an important question for us as an industry to kind of come to some conclusion on at some point is how are these things being fed into to develop these models? I think it's going to be really hard for some time to understand the transparency piece. It's not how it's built. It's not built to be able to say, I used exactly these things. So I think in lieu of being able to have transparent decision making, we have to have a way to check if the output is fair and accurate. And that's really challenging. But I think it becomes part of building out the process where we don't necessarily replace a whole process by saying whatever the AI model says we do, but the AI model becomes one input into what the process is that needs to have other checks and balances.
Yeah, I think the whole thing is revolving around trust. And I think it's all about building trust, just like the name of this live stream. It's a lot of the time, I think the final arbiters of what the models are doing, what the AI is doing, are the people that are experiencing the effects of it. So even though there's regulation out there, the EU passed their AI Act, it's in action right now. The US is developing its own version of this, and there's multiple countries with different versions of this. I think it's really important that people start to think about the definition of what does fairness mean in these contexts? What do we mean by understanding what exactly an AI solution is doing? Because we don't understand a lot of the time how software works that we rely on and we trust. We don't understand every line of code in the browsers that we use to browse the internet, but we can build trust around the safety and security of these systems. So I think some degree of breaking down components of the things that we do to understandable bits, a bill of materials, if you may, is I think needed in this area. Just like how a lot of companies require that the software products that they use, the infrastructure products that they use, are broken down into bill of materials so that they can verify the individual security of individual components going into these. And no software is built entirely from scratch today. It's always leveraging components, just like how AI solutions are always leveraging different parts of foundation models, of vector databases, or of componentization. And so all of that is, I think, how the industry needs to mature.
Cool. Thank you. So, Clarence, I'm going to pass a question back to you. And this is, how do you see artificial intelligence being leveraged to streamline or automate any aspects of regulatory reporting or other compliance requirements? And this is something I'm super interested in because as a compliance officer, there is just constantly risks to manage and I need technology to help me. So like how can I become more efficient? What are some of the top things you're seeing?
Yeah, I think that's a lot of risk management and compliance is really trying to find a needle in the haystack. It's trying to go through vast amounts of information to find things that are going to get you and your organization into trouble if not dealt with. And then documenting all of this so that you can prove that you have done all you can to the best of your abilities to keep everyone safe. And traditionally this was hard to automate because it's really hard to just pass a bunch of free form documents that you can't dictate the format around, or do a bunch of research online about something you're trying to find out about and then expect to be able to automate that easily. And I think one of the biggest areas that has made improvements in the last few years is the ability to take really unstructured forms of information and help you to look for what you're looking for with a pretty high degree of confidence. And I think this is what risk and compliance is going to evolve into. A lot of risk and compliance doesn't have to involve the administrative tasks of looking through hundreds of pages of stuff and then creating hundreds of pages of reports that someone else has to look at. And I think a lot of this can be automated with the big caveat that these AI models need to be able to prove their work. The proof of work piece is really important because I think that's the fundamental of how you build trust. And I think it's probably not going to be the big OpenAI, ChatGPT type companies that are going to do this because that's not the majority of the use case. And so that's where companies that build specific products for risk and compliance come in and augment these solutions with these functionality, or they build on top of it or build from scratch to achieve this.
Cool. Thank you. Steph, what do you see as the top ways that AI can help with either regulatory reporting or other regulatory requirements that can save me some time?
If for your ad is like any other bank, then you're probably using reporting options that are quite limited. getting data out of the systems that you have is often in certain specific formats, which can make it really tough to work with other products and processes that you have in place. I think for me personally, that feels like an easy, unique opportunity where Excel filtering and sorting errors hopefully are something more of the past, and being able to take data and make it work in different processes more easily without having to do that manual piece of, I've got this report from this system, how do I get it to play over here nicely, can be a little bit more self-serve than maybe it's been in the past. So I think there's all a question of ambition, of how ambitious are you trying to be versus how like defined in your task of, this is something I do often that is challenging, that maybe I have to loop in an engineering team, but if I could just get this report structured in a slightly different way, then I might be able to do this on my own and reduce that feedback cycle.
Cool. I feel like this next question kind of piggybacks off of what we were discussing in terms of how AI can be used for efficiency for, your typical compliance officer. But what do you both think are some of the potential risks associated with AI-driven compliance systems? And then also, how can these risks be mitigated effectively? Steph, what are your thoughts?
Back to the word in our title of trust. I think the biggest risk is too much trust. Is if we trust in these models to have accurate answers all the time to replace big pieces of a process. Often, we've even seen headlines that have helped to explain some of these things, but when the data that's going into a model is biased, then the output is biased too. And as humans, we've developed a bit of a bias detector where sometimes we can say, oh, I heard someone say something and I can tell that's coming from a place of bias. And that can be really hard for a model to do on its own. How are we continuing to play that role of saying, oh, I can see this process is being built on biased data. This is not actually how we want to be running our internal processes, and repeating some of these biases that we've seen. How can you have that healthy skepticism of what's happening to make sure you keep bringing in your human magnifying glass to really take a look at what's happening?
We have an audience question, and I'm just going to read it out loud. And Clarence, if you want to tackle it, great. If not, we can pass it to Steph if you want to. The LinkedIn user says, can you talk a little bit about predictive products? Something that can give insight into where the threat may be coming from, what might be the unknowable, or just anything that comes to mind from that question.
Yeah, I think predictive products, in the terminology of AI, a lot of the generative AI products, things that generate content based on the distribution of information it's learning from, I think what has traditionally been the case is that AI is not so great yet at being creative. It's not so great yet at being reliably truthful in its creativeness. So predictive products tend to be a little bit challenging, but still, I think there's a ton of potential here because there's a lot of use cases in which we are generating content, even in risk and compliance, and we're trying to figure out how to describe a problem or to find the source of a problem. And so I think the predictive products in risk and compliance in fintech specifically have to be approached in a way where it is actually traced back to foundational steps of what can be proven and what is trustworthy, rather than using the traditional like, hey, ChatGPT, come up with a story for me type of approach, which I think then makes it a lot more usable.
Cool. Steph, any final thoughts on the predictive models?
I don't know. That's a pretty good one by Clarence. It's hard without knowing exactly
For sure.
which piece of the industry it fits in. But I think I'm curious to see how it plays into like more hypothesis generating around new products. So if we're thinking about like new offerings and being able to like, I agree with Clarence. I think humans are much, much more creative than the current state of AI, but I have seen humans be more creative with having frequent term that we hear in engineering of rubber duck, which is the concept of having someone to talk to, even if that thing doesn't respond. And I think that that can be a helpful thing here too, is wrong predictions can sometimes help you maybe decide what to do on your own.
That's interesting. I like that term.
Really
So
good to know.
we are getting towards the final part of our show where we do our book giveaway. So I just want to shout out to the audience. We're having a little bit of visibility problems with the comments, but if you are around and you would like to be entered for the book giveaway, please put your name in the LinkedIn comment and we will consider you. And while folks are doing that, Steph, I wanted to ask you kind of our final question that we ask all of our guests. What does building trust in fintech mean to you?
It's such a good final question because I feel like it's really at the crux of building anything in finance. Without trust, there really is no product in my mind. I think we saw that with some of the issues in banking where people were worried about if their funds were safe. And to me, there's a reason I don't keep my funds under my mattress, and it's because I trust in our financial system. So trust to me means that as someone who doesn't understand what's happening in the black box, I know that I'm being treated fairly, my assets are being considered fairly. And it's that reliability that we can have as an external user of the system to not have to know how a company does their processes, to know that I, as an individual, am safe working with them.
Cool. Thanks. Clarence, how about you?
I'll approach this question from the AI application lens in fintech. I think there's so many ways that fintech has built, financial services has built the trust with consumers over time. And I think the introduction of AI, if done in irresponsible ways, can break down that trust very quickly. We've seen examples of failures of how AI interactions with customers directly or AI impacts in how fintechs and financial institutions use these products and services has caused failures. So I think the building of trust in fintech has to be balanced with it has to balance out rather the excitement and the energy that's coming from the other end, where everyone, all the executives focusing on growth and acquisitions and efficiency are talking about how you can use generative AI to grow the company. I think the building trust piece is all about saying to everyone, hey, let's take a sec to think about this. Let's what are the impacts of this? What are the risks of using this product? What are the risks of jumping right into this right now? And to really take a sound approach at evaluating what it means for everyone, for consumers, and for everyone involved in the company.
Cool. Thanks so much. All
Fabulous
right.
answer.
We are to the book giveaway portion. So, Stephanie, can you tell us a little bit about your book and why it's important to you? And then pick a winner and we'll
Yeah.
get booked to that person.
I'm picking one of my favorite books, which is The Structure of Scientific Revolutions. It is an old book at this point, but I love it so much because it's helped me develop a mental model around how humans learn and how societies change as a whole. It does a really interesting job talking about how, as you accumulate more facts, you can change your understanding of how the world works. And I find it a very beautiful reflection on life in general. But I will warn anyone that is a bedtime book. It may put you to sleep. So with that, I will pick the winner as Yuval, who asked a very thoughtful question.
Cool. Thanks. Thanks so
Congrats, you all.
much.
We'll reach out to you individually to figure out how to send the book.
Cool.
And it sounds like a great book. I'm
Yeah.
interested.
All right. We should have like a library of all of our past book giveaways because they're so like different.
Yeah. We've had children's books, we've had fiction, autobiographies.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I love that though. So Clarence, can you tell us about the book that you would like to us to gift to an audience member, and who would you like to pick?
The book I'm thinking of giving out to audience members is Progressive Capitalism by Congressman Ro Khanna. I read this book last year and I felt like it was one of the most realistic, but also optimistic views at how technology and AI can change society for the better. and also, of course, what needs to change for this to happen. A lot of the problems in technology and AI and the bad press that comes along with it is influenced by the way that technology actually affects different groups of people unevenly, and it benefits different groups of people unevenly as well. So I think it's a book about how, in an ideal world, government can actually play a strong role in that and can help to make sure that we're developing these technologies and distributing them efficiently and fairly. So the person I'd like to give this away to is Catherine Guys.
Cool. Thank you.
Cool.
Congrats, Catherine. We will reach out to you on LinkedIn and get that book over to you. That wraps up our show. Thank you so much, Clarence. Thank you so much, Stephanie. I'm definitely going to go back, and there are so many good nuggets of wisdom in this in this episode. I really enjoyed it. So just thank you so much for your time, and just so excited to follow both of you and see what you build, because I I definitely need the technology. I want to see these compliance solutions. So yeah, thank you.
Yeah, you echoing everything that Dana said. You both are incredible. I feel like I have jumped up 10 IQ points just from this 40-minute conversation, and it was incredible to pick your brains about the future of AI. So thank you for joining us, and as always, thank you to all of our wonderful supportive audience members for tuning in. We really appreciate you, and we will catch you next month.
All right. Bye.
Thanks so much for having us.
Thank you. Great
Take care.